All right, let's find the limit of this kind of complicated looking function where we have fractions inside of fractions. So the first thing I notice is our variable y is approaching 9. So to get started, and on each and every one of these, what you want to do is you want to start out and replace your variable with whatever value it's approaching. Do a little bit of simplifying. Sometimes you'll be done, and other times you will not be done, but that's okay. So each one of those y's is first going to get replaced with a 9. Now in simplifying, you may notice in our denominator, we're going to get 0. In our numerator, it looks like we have 1/11th, with a little simplifying, minus 1/11th, which will also give us 0 in the numerator. But that's okay. What that tells us is we need to continue on. It also tells us one other thing, and that is that 9 is the problem, right? Y minus 9 is going to end up being a factor in both numerator and denominator because it made each one of those equal 0 when we substituted in. So what I'm going to suggest we do to get started on this is let's think about those fractions in our numerator. We have 2 fractions. It would be a simpler version if we only had a single fraction, right? So let's get a common denominator by adjusting the denominators of each one of these fractions. It looks like the first fraction, if we had an 11 in this denominator, we would end up with both an 11 and a y plus 2. All right, so let's multiply that first one by an 11. Let's multiply the second one by y plus 2. Remember, if you multiply the denominator of a fraction by something, you have to multiply the numerator of that same fraction by the same thing. All right, let's take our time. We're going to get the limit as y approaches 9. For the time being, I'll leave it as y minus 9 down here. And then let's think about our fractions. Well, each of them is going to have 11 and y plus 2 in the denominator. But the numerators, we're going to multiply those together as well. So we have 11 times 1, makes it 11 for the numerator of that first fraction. And then we have 1 times y plus 2 in that second fraction. All right, not too bad. Now let's go ahead and put those together into a single fraction. All right, we want the limit as y approaches 9. Don't want to lose easy points by not writing that down. The y minus 9 in our denominator. But let's put these together over this common denominator of 11 times y plus 2. So in our numerator, be careful, it's going to be 11 minus 1 times y plus 2. And I'm taking my time here because this subtraction, this negative that was between our fractions, comes in key that negative needs to be distributed to each of those terms that originally came from that second fraction, the y and the plus 2. All right, so now that we're being careful of that, our next line here, let's think of this as y minus 9 down here. What are we going to have in our numerator, the little numerator at the top? Well, in distributing that negative, we're going to end up with 11 minus y minus 2. Well, that gives us like terms up in the numerator, which is pretty nice. All right, so bringing a lot of this stuff along, not really messing with a lot of it, y plus 2 comes along. Let's combine those like terms in our numerator. We will have negative 9, or negative y, and then 11 minus 2 makes plus 9. Okay, well, we're actually in a pretty good spot in this case. What I'm going to do next is I want to move this up. All right, that y minus 9 that's dividing the whole thing by y minus 9. Well, to do that, the operation is technically you are multiplying both numerator and denominator by 1 over y minus 9. The idea being that when you multiply y minus 9 and divide by y minus 9, that makes a 1. All right, so we can say the entire big denominator becomes a 1. We can kind of ignore it from here on out. All right, so we have 11 in our denominator. We have a y plus 2 in our denominator. And we also have, remember we just brought up the y minus 9. All right, in our numerator, we have negative y plus 9. What I'm going to suggest is, remember our end goal here is to get another y minus 9 up here in our numerator that we can eliminate. So I think we can accomplish that if we remove a negative or a negative 1 from each one of those terms. Hope that makes sense. I'm trying to look right here, and I want to see a y minus 9 there, but the signs are kind of backwards. So if we factor out a common factor of negative 1, that should accomplish our goal. Right? Negative 1 times y, it makes negative y. Negative 1 times negative 9 makes positive 9. So when we get to this point, you'll notice that we have a y minus 9 in the numerator multiplied by the entire numerator, a y minus 9 multiplied by the entire denominator. So we're allowed to reduce that down by eliminating them. So we're almost to the end here. Let's think about what remains. We still have a negative 1 in our numerator. There's an 11 and a y plus 2 down in our denominator, but everything else is gone. And that problem, having the y minus 9 in both numerator and denominator, has been eliminated. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to go back to the basics, back to the beginning, and we're going to evaluate this by replacing our remaining y with a 9. So that's going to be negative 1 over 11 times 9 plus 2, or a little bit more reducing down, I guess that's 11 multiplied by 11 as we add the 9 plus 2. And we'll finish up by doing 11 times 11 makes 121. And that will be this limit. All right. It's a bit of a process. I know fractions intimidate a lot of students as you're working through these, but just take your time. The big sticking point tends to be, remember, way up here where we had this negative. Try to highlight it here. This negative tends to be forgotten. We forget to distribute it if we have two terms in that second fraction. But remember, that needs to be distributed to each one of those in order to get to the correct answer. Take your time, one step at a time as you go through these, and you can get through them eventually. But it does take practice. Good luck.